Well, college football bowl season is underway. We've got a few of the minor bowl games out of the way now. Things are really about to heat up. 28 bowl games over the next 2 weeks, culminating, of course, with the national championship game, Notre Dame and Alabama, on January 7th. Now, we'll continue to put up bowl preview videos throughout the next couple of weeks here on the site. I want to at least talk about every one of these 28 games remaining. But what I want to do right now is talk about my favorite bets of the bowl season, my favorite games. Picked out 5 games. There were 5 games that really stood out to me out of the 28 that we have left as my favorite games out there. I want to mention those now. Let's start with the Holiday Bowl, Thursday, December the 27th. So just in a couple of days, we're recording this right now on Christmas Eve. So this Thursday, December the 27th, the Holiday Bowl, Baylor takes on UCLA. First time these two schools have ever met. The line, BETDAQ has not released the line on this game yet, but I talked to the traders. They said the line is going to be either pick or UCLA -1, so we'll go with the pick line. And that'll hold true for all these games. There aren't markets up quite yet on BETDAQ for any one of these games, but I do know what the lines are going to be, or at least within a half point what they're going to be, so we'll go off that. Anyway, the Holiday Bowl, Baylor and UCLA, it is pick. Baylor at 7-5, UCLA at 9-4. The Bruins, if you remember, almost won the Pac-12. They lost to Stanford in that Pac-12 championship game. They actually lost to Stanford twice in a row to finish the season. Still, very impressive job by Jim Moore Jr. in his first year as head coach there. The Bruins had been red hot before those 2 losses to Stanford. They had won 5 straight before they faced Stanford to close the regular season. And then once again, they met him in the Pac-12 championship game. But I lean towards the other side here. I like Baylor. I know Baylor has a worse record, 7-5. And Baylor, by the way, has one of the worst defenses in major college football. I mean, they have not been able to stop anybody this year. They're allowing 38 points per game, 513 yards per game, 123rd in the country in total defense. However, Baylor has the single best offense in the country, first in the country in yards per game, 579 yards per game, 44 points per game. That's 5th in the country. Listen, Baylor lost Robert Griffin III and 2 NFL wide receivers in Kendall Wright and Josh Gordon, and they have improved this year offensively in every single statistical category. Their quarterback, Nick Florence, leads the nation in total offense, 387 yards per game. Their best offensive player, a wide receiver, Terrence Williams, who does have an NFL future. Baylor really finished the season on a roll, 5-0 against the spread in their last 5 games. They won 4 of those games outright. Their last 3 games, all wins against Kansas State, who was the #1 team in the country at that time, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma State, 2 bowl teams. And the Baylor defense over the last month and a half, I mean, they weren't great, no doubt about it, but they were better than 123rd in the country. They started playing a little bit better, held that Kansas State offense to below 30 points, held Kansas to below 20 points, the first opponent they had held below 20 points all year. It's the Baylor offense here up against the UCLA defense. This is the big advantage Baylor's going to have here, and this is why I like Baylor in the game. We mentioned Baylor first in the country in total yards per game. Nick Florence averaging 387 yards per game. Florence, their quarterback. Well, UCLA really struggles in the secondary. They are 94th in the country in pass defense, and their best player in the secondary, free safety Tevin McDonald, is suspended for this game, violation of team policy. The Los Angeles Times reporting it was a failed marijuana test. Whatever the reason, Tevin McDonald, the Bruins free safety, probably their best player back in a bad secondary, will not be playing in this game. That is bad news when you're going up against this Baylor offense. Now, I understand why Baylor's not a favorite here. I understand why this line is right around pick, because UCLA, not only do they have a better record, but Baylor has such a bad defense, and UCLA does run the ball well. You know, they had no problem scoring points this year. They average over 200 rushing yards per game. And so a lot of people are thinking that UCLA is just going to be able to push around that Baylor defensive front, really control the ball game by just running it right down their throat. And to a large degree, I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, UCLA is going to score in this game. The total in this game is going to be, according to the BETDAQ guys, 80.5, 80.5. I mean, that is a tremendously high total. UCLA is going to move the ball in this game. They're going to score. Bottom line, I just don't think they're going to be able to keep up with Baylor and this offense, particularly being that UCLA is so bad in the secondary and they're going to be without Tevin McDonald in this game. I do like Baylor at pick. Next game I want to talk about this Saturday, December the 29th, the New Era Pinstripe Bowl, actually played in Yankee Stadium. West Virginia takes on Syracuse. West Virginia is going to be installed as a 4-point favorite on BETDAQ. These two teams very familiar with each other. They met every year from 1955 to 2011, but we thought this series was ending this year when West Virginia left the Big East. Just so happens they're meeting in a bowl game. Now, Syracuse dominated this game last year. These two teams met in the Carrier Dome. West Virginia was a big favorite in that game, I believe a 9 or 10 point favorite. I can remember that vividly because I was actually backing the Mountaineers. West Virginia was very hot at that time, and Syracuse just took it right to them, won that game 49-23. Really pushed West Virginia around. And Geno Smith, in his 2 career games against West Virginia, in his 2 games against Syracuse, Geno Smith, of course, the West Virginia quarterback, in his 2 career games against Syracuse, he has not had much success at all. And last year, the West Virginia defense was just run over by the Syracuse offense. Now, that might happen again this year because that West Virginia defense has not improved much. They are bad on that side of the ball, particularly in the secondary. 123rd in the country in pass defense. They're 116th in points allowed. West Virginia allowing 38.1 points per game. You remember the story of their season. They won their first 5 games, made it all the way up to number 5 in the country. Geno Smith was talked about as a Heisman frontrunner. I mean, Smith had a great year, threw for 4,004 yards and 40 touchdowns, first in the country. But after winning their first 5 games, West Virginia really fell off, lost their next 5 games in a row, and it's mainly because of that defense. They just were not able to stop anybody. Now, they got a little bit better at the end of the year. They won their last 2 games. But I like them in this matchup. I like West Virginia -4, mainly because Syracuse is not the same team they were last year when they pushed West Virginia around, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. Syracuse lost some key pieces of that defense who played for them last year, and this season they've just not been very good at all on the defensive side of the ball. I do not believe they're going to be able to have the same success against Geno Smith in this offense. And if you haven't seen the West Virginia offense play, treat yourself and watch this game. Geno Smith, the wide receivers, Stedman Bailey, Tavon Austin. Tavon Austin, as electric a player as there is in college football. I mean, they are really, really fun to watch. Run a very similar style offense to Baylor. We talked about Baylor. I like Baylor in the Holiday Bowl. Baylor and West Virginia, very similar teams. They played earlier this year. I believe West Virginia won 70-63 in an absolutely wild game. And I think similar to the Baylor-UCLA game, I just don't think Syracuse is going to be able to keep up here. Now, Syracuse will have some success. They can score. Their senior quarterback, Ryan Nassib, passed for over 3,600 yards this year, only 400 yards less than Geno Smith. He's 10th in the country in pass yards per game. But again, Syracuse has taken a step back on the defensive side of the ball this year. I don't think they're going to be able to stay with West Virginia in this game. And the fact that West Virginia lost to Syracuse last year, I think, works in their favor. Dana Holgorsen, over the last few days, I've heard him talk about how they've watched film of that game and it's provided them with motivation, and they're very familiar with what Syracuse is trying to do. So I think that's going to work in West Virginia's favor, like West Virginia -4 in the New Era Pinstripe Bowl. As a matter of fact, the only thing that might hold me off that, and you're gonna want to be sure to check this because this game, it is Saturday, December the 29th. A day or two before the game, check the weather report because this game is outside at Yankee Stadium. Now, West Virginia is used to the cold, but this is an offense that relies on the passing game. And if it's freezing rain or anything like that, you might want to think twice about this game. But as of now, I do like West Virginia -4 against Syracuse. Next game I want to get to, the Outback Bowl on New Year's Day, Tuesday, January the 1st. South Carolina from the SEC takes on Michigan. The Gamecocks currently installed as a 5.5-point favorite, or they will be when the line is released on BETDAQ. And I do like South Carolina in this game. I like the favorite. I think South Carolina is clearly better than Michigan. I mean, South Carolina, when you look at their season this year, they're one of the best teams in the country. They lost 2 games, road games, against LSU and Florida. Those games were back-to-back weeks. They did not lose before and have not lost since. They've overcome the loss of their best offensive player, Marcus Lattimore, very similar to last season. Lattimore was injured last season as well, and they actually picked up steam towards the end of the year. And they've done the same thing this year. Of course, last year it was running back Brandon Wilds stepping up and filling Lattimore's spot. This year they've done it a little bit of a different way because while Lattimore went down, Connor Shaw, who's played quarterback for the most part for South Carolina this year, he's been dealing with a foot injury as well. And so Dylan Thompson got a lot of playing time the last half of the season, including in their last game, a win over Clemson. And Thompson played very well. Now, Thompson is more of a traditional Steve Spurrier type quarterback, a drop back guy, whereas Connor Shaw is mobile. And I think Spurrier deserves a lot of credit for incorporating, changing his offense a little bit and suiting Connor Shaw's strengths. Because when Shaw's out there, they let him run around, and it's not your traditional pro-style drop-back offense like we've seen Steve Spurrier run throughout his coaching career. But Dylan Thompson does run that offense, and interestingly, even though Connor Shaw is going to be healthy for this game, Spurrier has not announced yet who he's going to play at quarterback. I wouldn't be surprised if he alternated quarterbacks like he's done many times throughout the years. Now, Spurrier, unlike some other coaches, has had some success alternating quarterbacks, particularly when he was back at the University of Florida. So I'm not sure that's going to hold back South Carolina in this game. The reason the main matchup here, the reason I give the advantage to South Carolina, I'm having a little bit of trouble spitting my words out here, is that South Carolina defense against the Michigan offense. South Carolina defense is stout. 13th nationally in terms of total defense. They only allow 17.4 points per game. Very balanced. 16th nationally against the run, 16th nationally against the pass. And when you look at Michigan, particularly their offense, very, very disappointing this season. Remember, Michigan was a top 10 team heading into the year. They lost 4 games and just not very good on the offensive side of the ball. Al Borges, their offensive coordinator, his scheme just does not mesh well with the players he inherited. Michigan's offensive players are designed for Rich Rodriguez's up-tempo spread offense, which they ran so well before Rodriguez got fired. Remember, it wasn't the offense that got Rodriguez fired. He had this Michigan offense humming with Denard Robinson at quarterback. It was just they were so bad on defense they could not win games. Well, they've fixed the defense. Greg Madison, defensive coordinator, has done an excellent job. Michigan was second in the country this year in pass defense. They were top 20 in total defense. But again, their offense, Al Borges, the pro-style offense, not working with the players he has. Denard Robinson at quarterback, and Robinson suffered an elbow injury towards the end of the season. Brady Hoke and Al Borges sort of use that as an excuse, I think, to get Devin Gardner into the lineup at quarterback. Gardner throws the ball better than Robinson. Robinson, of course, is a Michigan legend. Has had a great career, so they were able to do it without sort of Denard Robinson losing much face, which I think they were eager to do. I think they were eager to put another guy back there behind center because Robinson has really struggled to throw the ball in Borges' conventional pro-style offense. I mean, Michigan this season, 98th in the country in pass yards per game. Even though Gardner throws it better than Robinson, he's not a great passer himself. We haven't heard for sure who's going to start in this game. I do expect Devin Gardner to start, and I think very similar to the last couple of games of the season, we're going to see Denard Robinson in sort of a jack-of-all-trades role, running back, wide receiver, taking some snaps at quarterback. But Michigan's offense, 82nd in total offense, 98th in passing offense, going up against this stout South Carolina defense led by Jadeveon Clowney, who, unless he gets injured, is the surefire #1 overall pick in the NFL draft next season. There's no question about that. You can look at any mock draft you want. You could talk to any NFL person or listen to any NFL person you want. He's not eligible this coming draft, but next April, barring injury, Jadeveon Clowney will be the #1 pick overall in the draft. They're already talking about him as a Heisman candidate next year, which obviously a defensive player has never won the Heisman who hasn't at least contributed on offense. And so Clowney would be a trailblazer in that regard if he was able to do it. Now, I don't know if he's able to win the Heisman. I do know he's a defensive end who runs like a wide receiver, and Michigan is going to have all kinds of trouble keeping him off of whoever is playing quarterback. Denard Robinson, Devin Gardner. I like the South Carolina defense in this game. I think they're going to smother the Michigan offense. And South Carolina has been effective on offense this year. Not great, but they averaged 31.4 points per game. In their last 4 games, all wins. They scored 38 points against Tennessee and Arkansas, 27 points in a win against Clemson. So they're not bad on offense. I think they're going to score enough in this game. I envision a 27-13 type game, something like that. I do like South Carolina -5.5. Next game I want to talk about the same day, January 1st. That's a Tuesday night. It's the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all. 99th Rose Bowl, an 8-5 Wisconsin team. Wisconsin only in the Rose Bowl because Ohio State was on probation. Ohio State, of course, was undefeated this year. But Wisconsin representing the Big Ten in the Orange Bowl after their big win over Nebraska in the Big Ten championship game. They'll take on Stanford of the Pac-12. Stanford, of course, 11-2, beat UCLA in the Pac-12 championship game. Stanford is going to be installed as a 6.5-point favorite in this game on BETDAQ, and I like the underdog here. I like Wisconsin plus 6.5 points. Let me explain myself. Now, the big story surrounding Wisconsin football over these last few weeks, ever since they beat Nebraska in that Big Ten championship game, has been Brett Bielema, their coach, leaving for Arkansas. I mean, it was a real stunner because it seems like a lateral move. Arkansas, certainly not one of the top programs in the SEC, And Bielema had turned Wisconsin, into one of the top 10, to one of the top programs in the Big Ten. This is Wisconsin's third consecutive Rose Bowl. They lost the last two, but still, Wisconsin making 3 straight Rose Bowls is a big, big deal. So it was a little bit unusual. It really took everybody off guard. I'm sure it took Wisconsin players off guard that Bielema would leave to go coach Arkansas. Barry Alvarez, longtime Wisconsin coach who has been the athletic director, the man responsible for hiring Bielema, he's stepping in this game and coaching. Barry Alvarez stepping down from his office as athletic director, and once again he's coaching this game. Now, people forget, Barry Alvarez was an excellent, excellent coach. This guy's won 3 Rose Bowls. He's 3-0 in the Rose Bowl, and he was a great bowl coach specifically, 8-3 in bowl games. So Barry Alvarez knows what he's doing. He's had a few weeks with the team to prepare the team, and he knew the team intimately anyway, the strengths and weaknesses of this team, obviously. And I don't know. I don't think it's going to hurt Wisconsin at all, Bielema not being here. I think it might motivate the team. You know, something like this can go either way. These are young kids. They could either feel abandoned by the coach who had brought them to the school, or they kind of rally around each other and say, you know, we'll show this guy, we'll show the world that we can be just as good or better without this guy. And I think Alvarez is going to encourage that type of thing. You know, he's a great coach, was a great coach, and a great motivator. And I think Wisconsin is going to be ready to play in this game. Wisconsin and Stanford really mirror images. Both of these teams, great as far as running the football. Both these teams really struggle to pass the ball. Wisconsin, of course, led by Monte Ball. This guy, the all-time FBS leader in rushing touchdowns with 76, total touchdowns and 82. They feed him the ball. One of the best running backs in the country, probably one of the top 5 running backs in the country. And as long as we're ranking running backs, another running back who belongs in the top 5, Stanford's Stephon Taylor, rushed for over 1,400 yards this year. But Stanford, just like Wisconsin, struggles to pass the ball, very one-dimensional. The Cardinal, 94th in the country in passing offense. Wisconsin, 115th in the country in passing offense. Both these defenses very good against the run. Stanford was number 3 nationally this year against the run. They only allowed 87.7 yards per game. Wisconsin not far behind, 22nd nationally against the run. Keep in mind, though, teams in the Big Ten try to establish the run a little bit more than teams in the Pac-12, generally speaking. So Wisconsin faced a lot of teams whose MO was running the football. So I think these rush defenses probably very similar. Don't let the stats fool you into thinking that Stanford's rush defense is clearly better than Wisconsin's. And it's got to be noted, a key loss for Stanford in this game, their defensive tackle, Terrence Stevens, who's huge in their run defense. This guy's a future NFL player, great run stuffer, really occupies a couple of blockers at a time. He has been ruled ineligible for this bowl game because of a violation of NCAA rules involving off-campus housing. So that's going to hurt. Stanford is going to be down a big piece in their run defense. Wisconsin is going to run the football. The Badgers are great at defending the run. They know what's coming as far as Stanford goes. They know Stanford can't throw the ball. They know it's going to be Stephon Taylor all day long. I look for a low-scoring game here. I lean towards under 47.5. Do believe 47.5 is going to be the total. And I think the line's a little too big here. 6.5. Great spot for Wisconsin motivationally, I think. I think these two teams are very similar, really mirror images of each other stylistically. I like Wisconsin plus 6.5 in the Rose Bowl. The final game that I want to talk about, my final favorite bet of bowl season, the BCS title game. Alabama, Notre Dame. Monday the 7th is when this game is going to take place, Monday, January the 7th. And the market hasn't yet been released on BETDAQ for this game. They're either going to release the number at 9.5 or 10. I'm told they haven't decided yet. I don't care what it is. I like Alabama in this game. I don't care if it was 13. I like Alabama in this game. I expect a dominating performance from the Alabama Crimson Tide in this game. It's actually my favorite bet of the bowl season. Just happens to be the BCS National Championship game, the biggest game of them all. Folks, this is a mismatch. And Notre Dame fans, you might not like to hear it. This is a total mismatch. Notre Dame's offense, 77th in the country in points scored. They're very, very limited. They try to run the ball. They're above average running the ball. Really struggle to pass the football. Everett Golson, their quarterback, has done a nice job this year, I guess. He's serviceable. They've had to bring Tommy Rees in off the bench a couple of times. Rees, of course, has more experience, but Rees is on the bench for a reason. The Alabama defense, number 1 in the country in total defense. They only allow 246 yards per game. Number 1 in rush defense. Alabama only allows 79 rushing yards per game. Number 2 in points per game. They only allow 10.7 points per game. That Notre Dame offense against that Alabama defense, it's going to get ugly. Notre Dame, I do not believe, will score any more than 10 to 13 points in this game. Now, Notre Dame has a really good defense themselves. It's been well chronicled. We mentioned Alabama number 2 in the country in points allowed. Guess who's number 1 in the country in points allowed? That's Notre Dame, allowing just less than Alabama, 10.3, as opposed to Alabama's 10.7. But I'm not sure Notre Dame has faced an offense. I know they haven't faced a running game like what Alabama has with Eddie Lacy and TJ Yeldon. You know, I don't know if you saw that SEC championship game. These guys Alabama gets, I don't know where they come from. You know, from Mark Ingram to Trent Richardson, now Eddie Lacy, TJ Yeldon. Watching that SEC championship game, they showed a couple of ex-Alabama players on the sidelines. I believe it was Mark Ingram and Julio Jones, and the announcer sort of made a crack. He said, "Boy, don't you know Bama wishes Ingram could suit up for him right now." And then they cut back to the action where Eddie Lacy ran through about 3 Georgia defenders for about 18 yards, and I said, I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure how much Alabama is missing Mark Ingram. I think if Mark Ingram were suited up for Alabama right now, he'd be sharing time in this backfield with Eddie Lacy and TJ Yeldon, 2 future NFL stars, just as Ingram and Richardson are. Maybe calling Ingram an NFL star is a little bit of a reach, but hey, he plays in New Orleans, doesn't get a lot of opportunities. I know Notre Dame's been stout in the front 7 this year, no question about it. This is going to be without a doubt the best offensive line they've faced this season. Alabama has the best offensive line in the country. If you don't believe me, just wait for the next couple of NFL drafts and just watch this entire Alabama offensive line be taken in the first couple of rounds of the draft. Is a 14-10 game possible here? Alabama sort of squeaking out a low-scoring, ugly win? Absolutely, that's possible. I do not expect that. I do not expect that at all. Maybe it might start that way, 7-3 in the middle of the second quarter. I believe Alabama is going to wear down this Notre Dame defense. Notre Dame very untested in the secondary, and even though Alabama is a run-first team, we saw in last year's national championship game, they're not afraid, especially when Nick Saban has some time to prepare. They're not afraid to cook something up their opponent's not going to be prepared for. Wouldn't be surprised if A.J. McCarron came out firing in this game, loosened up that Notre Dame defense, and then Alabama just pounded them with those running backs. And once again, even if the Alabama offense takes a while to get their footing in this game, I don't think it's going to matter, because I expect their defense to have the Notre Dame offense on lockdown. I predict somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 total first downs for Notre Dame in this game, 7 to 10 points, something like that. I'll be shocked if they're able to move the ball with any regularity on this Alabama Crimson Tide defense. So there you have it, folks. Those are my 5 favorite bets of the bowl season. I like Baylor at pick in the Holiday Bowl against UCLA. That's Thursday the 27th. I like West Virginia -4 Saturday the 29th in the New Era Pinstripe Bowl. West Virginia taking on Syracuse. I like South Carolina -5.5 against Michigan in the Outback Bowl on Tuesday the 1st, January the 1st. And in the Rose Bowl, I like Wisconsin +6.5 taking on Stanford. Final game, the BCS Championship game, my favorite bet of all. Alabama, I don't care if it's -9.5, I don't care if it's -10. Get the best price you can, but as long as it doesn't go up past about 13, get on Alabama. You will thank yourself later. Love Alabama covering those points against Notre Dame in the BCS title game. So there you have it, folks. Like I said, this is not the last you'll hear from me on these bowl games. I just wanted to get my favorite bets out there, though. I wish you best of luck this bowl season in whatever you decide to do, just so long as your interests don't conflict with my interests.